The woman on the phone said she was with the county fraud division. She said a property transfer had been flagged on my house. Someone had sold it to a family member for $200,000. My house was worth $600,000, and my name was on the deed as the seller. I never signed anything. She asked if I had authorized the transfer. I told her no. She paused, and I heard her typing. Then she said something that made my hands go numb. I had 30 days before the transfer became permanent. After that, reversing it would take years in civil court if it worked at all. My name is Laura. I was 34 years old, and I owned a 3-bedroom house that I bought with 7 years of savings and a mortgage I paid on time every single month. Someone in my own family had forged my signature, sold my home for a third of what it was worth, and given themselves a 30-day window to get away with it. 20 of those days were already gone. I did not know yet who had done it, but I knew the buyer was listed as a family member, and I knew that whoever planned this had counted on me never finding out until it was too late. They were almost right. I called my mother first. Linda picked up on a second ring, and when I asked about the property transfer, the line went quiet for 3 full seconds. That silence told me everything. She said I needed to talk to my father. Frank got on the phone like he had been expecting the call. He did not even pretend to be confused. He said Bradley needed a place and that the family had handled it. Like selling my house out from under me was a chore someone checked off a list. I asked him what he meant by handled it. He said Bradley had been renting for too long and needed stability, and that since I had equity in the house, they had worked out a family price. $200,000 for a home appraised at $600,000. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I told him I never signed anything. He said we could talk about it at dinner on Sunday. Then he hung up. That was the moment I stopped calling them for answers and started looking for proof. I went to my filing cabinet where I kept every document related to the house. The original deed was gone. The folder was there, but the deed itself was missing. I had not opened that folder in over a year, and someone had been in my home and taken it. I started pulling every document I could find. Bank statements, mortgage paperwork, insurance policy, and that is where I found the second thing that should not have been there. 6 months earlier, someone had added Bradley as a named insured on my homeowners policy. The change form had my signature on it, another forgery. Frank had not just decided to steal my house on a whim. He had been laying the groundwork for months. The insurance change gave Bradley a paper trail connecting him to the property. It was a setup, and it had started long before the deed transfer. That missing deed cracked open a pattern I had spent my whole adult life trying not to see. When I was 18, my parents told me they had set up a college fund for me. 2 years later, I found out the money had been redirected to Bradley's tuition. They called it a reallocation. When I was 26, they gave me $15,000 and called it an early inheritance advance. I called my grandmother that night. She was 81 and still sharp, and she told me the truth. The amount from her estate earmarked for me was $60,000. Frank had kept the rest and split it with Bradley. My grandmother said she had confronted Frank about it and he had told her I agreed to the smaller amount. She believed him until I called. Every time, the same pattern. Take from Laura, give to Bradley, call it family. Now they had graduated from skimming to stealing my entire house. And my father, a retired paralegal who had spent 20 years handling property documents, knew exactly how to make it look legitimate. Dad knew just enough law to be dangerous, not enough to be careful. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. I told the clerk I needed a copy of the most recent deed transfer on my property. She pulled it up and printed it without questions. The document was a quitclaim deed, which meant no title insurance, no lender approval, no third-party checks, just a signature and a notary stamp. The signature on that deed was not mine. It was close. Someone had practiced. But the L in Laura looped the wrong direction, and the A at the end was too sharp. I had signed enough mortgage documents to know my own handwriting, and this was not it. The clerk noticed me staring at the document. She asked if everything was all right. I told her the signature was not mine. Her finger stopped on the keyboard. She looked at the screen, then at me, and said, "Can you hold on one moment?" She called someone from a back office. A supervisor came out, a woman with reading glasses and a county lanyard, and asked me to explain the situation. I showed her my driver's license next to the signature on the deed. She held them side by side for a long time. Then she told me the transfer had been processed by a deputy clerk who was no longer with the office. She would not say more than that. But the way she said it made me think I was not the first person to sit at that counter with a problem connected to that name. The transfer date was March 2nd. I stared at that date because I knew exactly where I had been. I was in a hotel room in Richmond, Virginia, 200 miles away on a work trip. I had flown out on March 1st and come back on March 4th. I went home and pulled up every record I could find. My flight confirmation from the airline, the hotel receipt with my name and check-in time stamped at 4:17 in the afternoon on March 1st. Work emails I had sent from the hotel network on March 2nd and 3rd. A photo I had texted my husband from the hotel lobby. They sold my house while I was sleeping in a hotel room 2 states away. My signature was on a paper I had never touched. The notary listed on the deed was someone I had never heard of, a name in a town 40 minutes from where I lived. Whoever this person was, they had stamped a document swearing that I had appeared in front of them and signed it. That was a crime. And it meant someone else was involved beyond my parents. I made copies of everything. The fake deed, the flight records, the hotel receipt, the work emails, the time-stamped photo. Then I called a real estate attorney named Grace and told her I needed an appointment that same day. She heard the word forgery and said she could see me at 3. I had not even made it to the attorney's office when the family campaign started. Frank worked fast. By noon, my phone was buzzing with messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely spoke to. Every single one had the same message. Laura is being greedy. Laura is tearing the family apart over a house. My Uncle Roger texted me a paragraph about how family should come first. My Aunt Helen called and left a voicemail saying she was disappointed in me. My cousin sent a message that just said, "Bradley deserves this." None of them asked for my side. None of them knew about the forgery. Frank had gotten to them first, and he had told them exactly enough to make me the villain. Then Linda called my husband David, not me. She called David directly and told him he needed to talk some sense into me. She said I was being emotional and that this was a family matter, not a legal one. David told her that forging someone's name on a deed was not a family matter. Linda hung up on him. But the worst part came that afternoon. I drove past my house on the way to the attorney, and the locks had been changed. New deadbolt, new handle, different color. Bradley had not wasted any time. He had already started moving in. I parked across the street and watched a moving truck in my driveway. 2 men were carrying a couch through my front door. Bradley came out and waved at a neighbor like he owned the place, because on paper, he did. That evening, my neighbor Rebecca called me. She sounded confused. She said Bradley had knocked on her door that morning and introduced himself as the new owner. He told her I had sold him the house because I was moving out of state. Rebecca said she did not believe him because I had never mentioned moving, but she wanted to check. That meant Bradley was not just occupying the house, he was building a story around it, telling the neighbors I had left willingly. Laying a trail so that when the 30 days closed, no one would question the transfer. It was coordinated, and it was moving fast. I sat in my car for 10 minutes after Rebecca's call. I could feel my chest getting tight and my jaw clenching, but I did not go to the door. I did not make a scene. I took photos of the moving truck, the new locks, and the text from Rebecca. Then I drove to Grace's office. Every piece of evidence I collected was another brick in the wall I was building around them. Grace looked at the quitclaim deed, then at my flight records, then back at the deed. She set her pen down and said, "This is not subtle. Whoever did this was counting on you, never checking." She explained the 30-day window. Under state law, a quitclaim transfer could be challenged during a review period, but once it closed, the new owner had standing and I would need a full civil trial to reverse it. We had 11 days left. 11 days to prove the forgery, file the paperwork, and get a judge to freeze the transfer before it locked in forever. Grace called a forensic document examiner that afternoon. His name was Peter, and he had testified in court over 40 times on handwriting cases. She sent him scanned copies of the quitclaim deed and 3 samples of my real signature from mortgage documents I had on file. He said he would have a preliminary report within 48 hours. 2 days later, Peter called Grace and put her on speaker so I could hear. He walked through it piece by piece. The stroke angle on the L was 9 degrees off from every known sample. The pen pressure in the middle of the signature was twice as heavy as mine, which he said was a classic sign of someone tracing slowly. And the letter spacing between the U and the R was compressed in a way that did not match any of my natural patterns. He did not hesitate with his conclusion. The signature on the quitclaim deed was a forgery. He said he would stake his professional reputation on it in any courtroom. Grace filed the emergency injunction that same afternoon. 11 days left on the window, and we were asking the court to freeze the transfer before it became permanent. The filing included Peter's preliminary report, my flight records, the hotel receipt, the work emails, the forged insurance edition, and an affidavit from me swearing I had never authorized the sale. But Grace had found something else while preparing the filing. The notary listed on the deed, the one named Tom, had a prior complaint on file with the State Notary Commission. 3 years earlier, someone had reported him for notarizing a document without the signer present. The complaint had been dismissed for lack of evidence, but the pattern was there. The court clerk told Grace the hearing was set for 9 days out, 2 days of margin. If anything delayed us, if a filing was rejected or a hearing got bumped, we would lose the window. Frank had timed this perfectly. He had filed the transfer knowing I would not catch it in time. The county audit was the one thing he had not planned for. Frank did not go quiet. 5 days before the hearing, his attorney submitted 2 pieces of evidence to the court. The first was a typed letter, dated 6 months earlier, claiming that I had given verbal consent to the sale at a family barbecue. The letter described a conversation that never happened at an event I had attended but never discussed property at. It was unsigned by me and had no witnesses listed. Just Frank's word. The second piece was worse. Linda had submitted a set of text message screenshots showing a conversation between me and Frank where I supposedly agreed to the sale. The messages showed me saying things like, "That sounds fair," and "Bradley deserves a break." The screenshots were formatted as iPhone messages, with the blue bubbles and the timestamps in the top corner. Grace called me the moment she saw them. She asked me one question: "What kind of phone do you have?" I told her I had used an Android for 6 years. I had never owned an iPhone. The screenshots were fabricated on a device I had never used, in a format that did not match my phone, with messages I had never sent. Grace submitted my phone records directly from my carrier, 6 years of billing, all on Android devices. She also submitted screenshots from my actual phone showing no conversation with Frank matching those dates. The metadata did not match. The format did not match. The content did not match. My mother had faked the entire thing and had not even bothered to check what kind of phone I used. 3 days before the hearing, Frank called me directly. It was the first time he had spoken to me since the day he hung up. His voice was different, slower. He said maybe there was a way to work this out as a family. He suggested we all sit down together, no lawyers, and figure out a fair arrangement. I told Grace about the call. She said that was a consciousness of guilt and that I should not engage further. But then she asked me to repeat exactly what Frank had said. I told her he had said, "I handled the paperwork and maybe I should have talked to you first." Grace went still. Then she said, "He just admitted to handling the paperwork. Say that again, slowly." I had not even realized what he had given me. In trying to smooth things over, Frank had admitted on the phone that he was the one who had prepared the forged documents. Grace added it to our filing as a supplemental declaration. Frank had handed us another piece of the case without even knowing it. The hearing was on a Thursday morning. Grace had subpoenaed the notary who had stamped the quitclaim deed. Tom walked into the courtroom looking like he had not slept in days. I found out later that Grace's office had contacted him 3 days before the hearing, and he had cooperated immediately. The prior complaint on his record meant another notary violation could end his career. He had every reason to tell the truth. Tom sat down and told the judge exactly what happened. Frank had come to him alone. He had told Tom that his daughter could not make it to the signing and had asked him to notarize the document anyway. Frank said it was a family matter and that I had already agreed. Tom admitted he had stamped it without me present. He said Frank had been convincing and that he had not verified my identity because Frank had vouched for me personally. The judge asked Tom if he had ever met me. Tom said no. The judge asked if he had made any attempt to confirm that I had authorized the transfer. Tom said no again. He looked at Frank when he said it, and Frank would not look back. Grace presented everything. The forged signature confirmed by Peter's forensic analysis. My flight records proving I was 200 miles away on the day of the signing. The forged insurance edition from 6 months earlier showing premeditation. The fabricated text screenshots made on an iPhone I had never owned. The carrier records proving 6 years of Android devices. Frank's own phone admission that he had handled the paperwork. Tom's testimony confirming I was never present. Frank's attorney tried one last argument. He stood up and told the judge that this was a family misunderstanding, that there had been verbal consent at a barbecue, and that the paperwork was simply handled improperly. The judge let him finish. Then he asked Frank's attorney to identify a single piece of evidence, any evidence at all, that I had consented to the sale of my home. The attorney did not answer. The judge did not deliberate long. He granted the injunction and voided the sale. He ordered the title restored to my name immediately. Then he said something that turned the entire courtroom silent. He said the evidence suggested a deliberate pattern of criminal conduct, including forgery, fraud, and the submission of fabricated evidence to the court. He was referring the matter to the district attorney's office. Frank's face went white. Not red, not angry, white, like the blood had left his body. Linda grabbed his arm. Bradley, sitting in the back row, put his head in his hands. None of them had expected this to reach a courtroom. None of them had expected the notary to talk. And none of them had planned for a judge who took forgery seriously. 11 days. That is how close they came to stealing everything. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation within a week. Frank was the primary target, but the file included Linda's fabricated screenshots and Bradley's role as the knowing buyer of a property sold at a third of its value. A detective called me to confirm the timeline, and I gave him every document I had. Grace said criminal charges were likely but could take months to formalize. Bradley's $200,000 was gone. He had paid Frank and Linda directly, a cash transfer outside of any escrow or title company, and they had already spent most of it. They had used it as a deposit on a vacation home in another state. The deposit was non-refundable. Bradley had paid for a house he never owned with money he would never see again, and his parents had burned through it before the court date. I had the court ruling sent to every family member who had called me greedy. I did not add a note. I did not explain. I just sent the document. Roger never texted me again. Helen left one more voicemail, this time apologizing. My cousin who said Bradley deserved the house deleted her social media for 2 weeks. Bradley confronted Frank in the courthouse parking lot after the hearing. I was not there for it, but Grace saw it through the window. Bradley was shouting. Frank was standing with his arms crossed, not saying a word. Linda was sitting in the car with the door closed. The family that had been so united in calling me greedy could not even get through the parking lot without turning on each other. Frank and Linda stopped calling. They stopped texting. They did not show up to Thanksgiving that year. Bradley sent me one message that said, "You didn't have to do this." I did not respond. There was nothing left to say to someone who moved into a house he knew was stolen. David and I changed the locks back on a Saturday morning. He brought coffee and I brought the new keys. We stood in the living room where Bradley's couch had been, and it felt like mine again. Not because of the keys or the deed, because I had fought for it and I had won. The attorney told me Frank could face up to 5 years for the forgery charge alone. The fabricated evidence Linda submitted to the court was a separate offense. The notary was cooperating fully. Whether they would see a courtroom again was up to the DA, but the file was thick and the evidence was clean. I think about that phone call sometimes, the one from the county fraud investigator on a random Tuesday morning. If she had not called, if the audit had not flagged the undervalued transfer, I would have lost my house and never known why. My parents had counted on silence. They had counted on me trusting them enough to never look. And for 20 of those 30 days, they were right. But the call came, and I answered it. Thank you for staying with me through this one. Some stories sit with you for a while, and I hope this one does. If you believe that the people who take from you should have to answer for it, then you are in the right place. Every betrayal gets answered here. If that matters to you, I will be here next time.